tonight, and I am talking on the subject of righteousness. Exactly. I wonder what you think of when you think of righteousness, what comes to your mind. I was thinking about this, and I suppose I thought a bit about self-righteousness, which isn't great, is it? That's being a bit up yourself. What actually do we mean by righteousness? It means, I always think it's really somebody that's quite better than me, basically. So I found it helpful to look it up and see what the definition of righteousness is. And actually, I suppose biblically, it's about having right relationships with each other and with God. So I found that really helpful, actually, because I can do that, mostly. I can do that. And I don't know how many of you studied religious studies at GCSE and know about the Golden Rule. Oh, man, I can't... Did you? Yes, come on. Yeah, the Golden Rule, which you are taught at religious studies, is do to others as you would have them do to yourself. And that is righteousness, I think, actually, treating other people, putting yourselves in their shoes and seeing what their situation is. But I think we find that really hard if we're not in a right relationship with God. So to do that without that is really hard. And actually how people are treated is really important to God. It's really important because he is a person who treats us well and he really cares for people. And actually, that was the wind. Actually, God's kind of big will for us, because God could do everything without us. He doesn't need us. It's only because he's an amazing, generous, and loving God that he wants to act in community with us. His will for us is that under his guidance, we really grow into a just and righteous society. That's what he really wants. It's really important to him because it's his character. So I'm thinking if it's really important to God, then it should be really important to us. Because a lot of the Old Testament has the prophets who are messengers of God, and they come in and they have a go at the people, but most of the time it's because they're treating people badly. I think sometimes in church, I think, I'm not a really great Christian when I get to church on a Sunday, because I think, have I really prayed that much? And have I read my Bible as much as I could have? But actually, God uses Isaiah to say, I can't listen to your prayers because you've got blood on your hands, because you are mistreating people, you are mistreating the vulnerable. So in a way that encourages me, because I think I'm probably a bit better at treating people nicer than I am always at reading the Bible and praying about stuff. So it's really important. In fact, I think that we are really called to rally each other in prayer to demand righteousness in our society. And when I looked into this, I realised we have got a massive history of this in the UK. I don't know if you know about this, but Churchill called a National Day of Prayer in 1940 at the start of the Second World War. And every 3 years after that, they had 2 National Days of Prayer a year. That's a wow, isn't it? And that's been going on for hundreds of years in our country, where we've had National Day of Prayer. And John Wesley writes about it as well in 1756. He was the founder of Methodism. He writes how there was a danger that the French were going to invade, boo the French, and they called a national day of prayer and fasting. And he writes in his diary that everyone was in church that day praying, and actually the French didn't invade. So, that's amazing, isn't it? I was thinking, this is fantastic. And some of you will remember Jubilee 2000 in the year 2000, a massive Christian campaign that was campaigning for justice for the developing countries who had debt from the Western banks. And actually, that was underpinned by Christians praying and fasting. So that's an amazing thing, isn't it? So we do read in the Bible as well about fasting for righteousness. So the chapter I was asked to speak on is Esther 4. Esther is a great short book, which actually doesn't mention God at all. I think it's the only book in the Bible that doesn't mention God. But I watched the Bible Project explanation of it, and it is really encouraging. So if you think about it, listen to Esther. But in Esther, what happened is that the Jews were in exile. Some of them had returned, but some of them were still in Babylon. And the king there, who the Bible Project says was a bit of a waster, so that's an official view, he had decided to get another wife, and it was Esther, a Jew, a lady from the Jews, but he didn't know she was Jewish. And his deputy argued with a Jew, and so decided that he wanted to annihilate all the Jews in that country at that time, and actually got the king to agree with it, probably refer to previous comment. So the king did agree to it, agreed that on a certain day in a certain month, all the Jews would be killed in that country. So when Esther found out about this, her uncle came to her and said, well, you can do something about this because you're in the right place. But she couldn't just approach the king in those times. So in fact, if she approached the king and he didn't like it, he could kill her. So she had a lot at stake. So she asked the Jews to prepare for this mission of hers by fasting for 3 days, which they did. And then she was able to approach the king without being killed, and the whole situation was averted. But you should look at the Bible Project explanation of it. It's brilliant. So I think, that's an amazing example in the Bible about where a whole nation fasted and situation was radically altered. So I think there really is a link between prayer and fasting. I don't think it says an awful lot in the New Testament about how you should fast. In fact, when the disciples say to Jesus about prayer, and he gives them the Lord's Prayer, that's not mentioned. But Jesus does say when you fast. He doesn't say if or maybe you should. So maybe actually it was just a massive cultural thing that they did fast. And that's what they did, and they just got on with it. So I really think that there is a place for us to fast, to reinforce our prayer life. And that's why I was quite keen to speak on it today. And I was really interested to see that today the Ukraine church leaders have called for a day of prayer and fasting tomorrow. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it, for that country that is under serious threat, that the church leaders have called together all their people to fast and pray. So I think, it is something we should consider. And I suppose, when would you fast? Because you can't fast all the time. I suppose it almost is saying, okay, it's getting really serious now, God, I'm taking action. You can understand Esther. She thought she was going to die. She thinks, okay, let's fast. This is pretty serious. But I think maybe for us, it is almost like, I've had enough of praying and nothing's happening. I want breakthrough. I'm really serious about this. I'm prepared to self-sacrifice in my prayer life. So I think as well, it's really good if we do this as a community for situations, or in our home groups, or even in our schools. If there's something going on that we think that's not right, that's not righteous, we should join together. And I think sort of saying, right, this is how seriously we take it. We should fast about it. And actually, I was just reminded of last year, one of my colleagues in WTC, who's Dutch, Jasper, you may know him. He and his wife went over to Holland, where he's from, and had a baby. And they tried to return to the UK, and it was just after Brexit. And actually, they couldn't come back into the UK with their baby because they couldn't get a working visa for their baby, because the immigration that were concerned, they couldn't work out what to do with the baby because it was quite new into Brexit. So basically, I didn't know, we were all on Zoom last year. I assumed he'd come back to Bristol, but then one time I just said, I assume Jasper's back in Bristol, and somebody said, no, he can't come back to Bristol, even though he and his wife both had working visas. So I thought, well, that's ridiculous. Because he had the baby in January. This is May. He can't come back to his rented accommodation. So I said, we should have a day of prayer and fasting for this. So as a team, we just agreed a certain day that we would have a day of fasting, and then we had a Zoom call for all of us where we prayed about it. Now, you should ask Jasper, because it is a brilliant story, and he has returned to the UK. But it felt really like he'd already got, he'd got his MP involved, he'd got all the employees, various things, had already got involved. He'd gone as far as he could. And I suppose we said, actually, we're really serious about this, so we're going to fast. So I thought that was for us, that felt like a really encouraging thing to do. So I suppose I would just like to say, in Esther, she came to become queen in quite sort of coincidental circumstances. If you read it, it seems all a bit random. But actually, as her uncle said to her when he said, you've got to do something about this, he said, maybe you are queen for such a time as this. And I do wonder, sometimes we might think, what am I doing in this situation or this workplace or this community? And it might be like Esther, that actually we've been brought into a situation to ask for justice in that situation, to demand righteousness. So I suppose I would sort of challenge us to think, are there things that we're involved in where actually we need to take a stand in and pray about them and also to fast about it? So I suppose that's my challenge to you. Is it that you were brought to where you are for such a time as this?